Test 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2.
You know that's going to end up in the final thing. Hello, this is Never Heard of It podcast. I'm Sean Harwell, joined as always today by...
Craig Moorhead, that's me, the co-host of Never Heard of It, the podcast you're listening to currently. About, this is the podcast about movies that have fallen through our cracks.
That's right, Craig. Today, we have a very special crack to add to the podcast. We have guest, an independent filmmaker, writer, director, occasional actor, Heath Michaels.
Definitely not an actor.
You were in your own movie, so that counts.
Buying a TV.
Heath wrote and directed the independent film from 2010 called Yeardley.
Yeah.
About a man whose domestic life kind of falls apart after sexual harassment accusation of sorts.
Yes.
So that's fair to say.
Fair to say.
And if you haven't seen that, you got to go watch that. Where can they watch that, Heath?
Well, actually, it was for sale on Amazon, and right now it's not. We had an issue with Amazon itself, but we haven't put it up digitally anywhere. So,
well, maybe that'll happen. You can contact Heath, I'm sure, and he could hook you up. We'll make that an option through our website, but hopefully we'll get you back on Amazon sometime if Prime steps up, right?
Yes. Right.
We have a fun movie to talk about today, but I think before we get into that, we'll do a little chat with Heath, sort of like we've done in the past when we had filmmakers on. Mm-hmm. Craig and I know Heath from film school, as most of our guests have been, which is great. It's a great thing for us to have that available to us, and we've all kept in touch. And he's been at it, doing the grind. Had some recent screenwriting success on the contest circuit at the Nichols Fellowship, which is probably the creme de la creme of all screenwriting contests, for sure.
That's what I hear.
For sure. And then also in the final draft, the software contest. So that's fantastic. Awesome things ahead. I think we should start with our kind of go-to question, which is, at what point did you realize this was something you wanted to do, and why? Make movies.
Oh, make movies? Oh, God, that's... you're supposed to kind of prep people for the questions, right?
No, there's no prep. You've listened, yes.
Okay.
You've been prepping for this all your life.
I can't say that there was one definitive moment. You know, I think it was just a matter of we had a really great theater back in my hometown that was just excellent, and I used to go there all the time. It was like $1.50 to watch a film, and these were new releases, so I would just watch multiple times during the weekend, and that just got me excited.
Nice.
I mean, there's really not a better story.
Any specific movie that stands out from that theater experience? What was the first movie you saw there? Do you remember?
Oh God, I couldn't even tell you.
First, you don't remember? Okay.
And not the first movie.
Yeah. But
I remember movies that I watched when I was younger. You know, like Black Hole and Star Wars. Obviously, I saw the first Star Wars in theater.
Nice.
77. And I think that was probably like the big one.
Sure.
Yeah.
And was there a moment where we like to kind of ask, okay, that you realized, you know, my taste might be a little different from my buddies, or maybe I like movies more than the average Joe?
Yeah, but you know, it was growing up in my hometown. It's such a small hometown that I feel like it was kind of embarrassing to say it. Like, you know, it was like a small southern town in North Carolina, and people always tell me, like, what did you want to be when you graduated? And everybody's like, you know, I want to be a police officer. I want to be a nurse. And, you know, to say I want to go make movies in Hollywood. It's just like, yeah, slow down there, astronaut. So, no.
Yeah, I don't know. You guys maybe had the same experience. I remember being in film school and then, like, say between freshman and sophomore year, going back to my small town to work during the summer. And people ask what you're doing or where you go to school, and you tell them you're at film school. I either got two responses. The first one was which just people went, oh. And then the second one was, oh, you're going to be the next Spielberg. Don't forget me when you get famous.
Every time. Yeah. Every time.
Yeah.
And obviously, there was no middle ground between that for a lot of people. So, you know, it's managing those expectations a little bit. Well, let's talk about Yeardley. How did that project originate?
Yeardley was just... Okay, so I wanted to direct something. I was ready. The stuff that I wanted to direct was going to cost too much.
Sure.
So I needed something I could do that would be, as close to free as possible. So we paid about $15,000. That was our budget.
Wow.
And I said, okay, I need a movie I can make for about $15,000. And I went the route of drama, and we cast it in like 2 days, and it was incredibly tough to do. And but we persevered, and we did really well in the festival circuit. Half the festivals we were nominated for Best Feature, which was great.
Awesome.
And then we made the monumental mistake of forewalling a theater and then like sending it out to LA Weekly, LA Times, Variety, and they completely eviscerated the movie in reviews. And we were like, because we were doing so great in the festivals, and then we get out, and it's just like, no, these are the big critics, and they see a $15,000 movie, they're like, why the hell is this on my desk? And so that was pretty much that.
Yeah.
But it was cool. I mean, we still had fun. The festival circuit was a blast. I mean, it did really well, especially in Santa Fe. We premiered in Santa Fe Film Festival, and we had no clue what was going to happen. We didn't know. We just knew we were world premiering.
Sure.
We show up, and we're at the final event at the end, and they're going through the best features. And you got stuff with like, West Studi, obviously, because it's New Mexico. You've got Bashimi film up there and all this, and then all of a sudden they cut to my face. They didn't even use like a still from the film. They used like a picture of me, and it was the most embarrassing thing. And I'm just sitting there, and my wife starts cracking up because she knows I hated that picture. But it was a good experience. I mean, to be nominated was really great.
Is it a picture of you with like a clapboard?
It was me holding a camera.
Oh, nice.
And it was so posed because I had to take the picture in order to submit to the
give
festival.
them something. Yes.
Yeah.
So I had to just go out and pose for it, and that sort of thing. So it was kind of a pain in the butt.
Well, I will point out on IMDb, Yeardley is currently enjoying a 9 out of 10 star rating. And to put that in perspective, Star Wars is at 8.7. So
boom.
That's pretty tight.
I would say that there's there's probably an issue with the aggregate score there, like the number of people scored.
Are you saying IMDb's lying, man? What's up?
But
take it down a notch. No,
but we'll ignore that and we'll look at it. And I'll take the 9 out of 10. That's pretty cool. I didn't even know. I mean, I made the film and just kind of moved on beyond that and was focusing on other things.
For sure.
So.
Well, that's a question I wanted to ask was, I think anybody listening to this probably understands that, if you make an independent movie, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be compromise, especially when you're talking about a $15,000 budget, which is crazy that you even finished it.
Yeah.
Things like doing the four-wall or submitting a headshot that you don't like. Is there anything else that you think is valuable advice, looking back at it, that maybe even like a sort of savvy filmmaker might not know or think of for this, like going through that experience?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is, cast longer than 2 days.
Okay, that seems like problem. A good,
And I was fortunate because we wound up with some really top-notch actors. I mean, people who were, down to work really hard and, did an amazing job. But I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I could give is to learn to broom people early on. Is like, don't try to force a square peg into a circle hole. Right. That is something that is very important. If you feel that you're having to chase people to get things done, you got to, especially at that level, you got to just you can't force people to be excited about something they're just not excited about.
Right. And maybe it's not going to get better than at the start. Yeah.
Yeah, and because you can find people that are wanting to work with you, and when you find those people are going to give 110%, and it's going to be awesome. And that would be one of the things I would say that was a big valuable lesson. Also, don't make a film for $15,000 would probably be the second lesson.
Well, I was curious about that because you shot in Los Angeles, and that's I think in a lot of ways it's more difficult than people imagine, just because you think there's industry here. But like I know, for example, you got kicked out of Griffith Park one day.
Yep. Well,
all things being equal, would you do it in LA again? Like if you could just take the same amount of money and know that you get a good crew some other location, would you shoot in a city again?
The funny thing is, I'm about to shoot a short and it's going to be shot here in LA. And even though I said if I didn't have the money, I wouldn't shoot in LA again, I'm lying now because I'm going to come and shoot in LA again. But
well, that's a short, and maybe that's the difference between that and a feature.
It's a short, one location, almost one location. So it's much easier to manage. The problem with Yeardley was we were on location all over. And it was just like, oh, we're going to do a story, and then they'll be in the park, and they'll be over here, and they'll be doing this. And we went up to Griffith Park to shoot one little sequence, one little scene. It's like a conversation and looking out at the city. We shot all one direction, and then the Rangers show up. And it was hilarious because they show up and they kick us out. And we tried to, finesse some sort of arrangement, and they said, no, you got to leave. Funny thing was, so we had to leave and come back a week later to shoot everything the opposite direction. So the actors are like acting off of each other from a week apart. I swear we tried to shoot everything there, sneak it. And so we would sneak around, try to get off the path and go. I remember one time we went into the woodsy area and we're like discussing, maybe we can shoot it here. And then I look up and there's a ranger, like I could see them up at the top, like they're just peeking down and and at one point, they had a helicopter out. I swear to God, they had the helicopter out.
Wow.
And I was like, these are a lot of resources to put on just a few independent filmmakers that aren't stopping anybody. Seriously, we had 5 people going up there. We had a sound guy, 2 actors, me, and the camera person, and that was basically it.
Yeah, and maybe there's also some of that loss of mystique for the people that live here, but seeing a film crew down the street is not an unusual experience, whereas everybody else oh wow, this is fantastic, how neat.
I still like it when I go down the street and I see that there's grip trucks and stuff. I like to look and just see what people are doing. It's cool. It's interesting.
But maybe that adds to some of the challenge of shooting in Los Angeles at that budget level and stuff. What about in the post finishing the movie? And anything from the festival world that you think is good advice as far as picking and choosing, where you go or who you submit to, or
I definitely
budgeting for that, because I know it's not a cheap thing.
You got to have a strategy. That's what everybody said, and I didn't quite understand that at first, and so I did some research, and I think we did it right because we did tier 1. We decided what would be tier 1, and we did that first, and then so all the ones you want to hit like Sundance, Toronto. Of course, we didn't make any into those. And then you go to tier 2 next, But we did get into Santa Fe, and that was the end of our tier 1. And so we were so excited to get in there because we had a little $15,000 movie, so we didn't have high expectations. But I'd say we'd definitely come in with a strategy. Hit the ones you want first. You don't have to. If you shotgun it out to all the festivals, you're going to get into a really crappy one in in Starkville, Mississippi or something, and you don't want that to be your world premiere because that might jinx you later because something like Sundance won't bring you in if you've already premiered it.
Yeah, and that's something that I didn't know, I think, until hearing about your experience, was that is a big part of it, is those festivals want to be the place to premiere a movie.
Yes.
So yes, that does become a situation in certain circumstances, I'm sure.
And you got to think about world premiere versus
U.S. premiere,
U.S. premiere, regional premiere, state premiere. So when you're doing your world premiere, so if you're going someplace and you're like, okay, we got into a festival, and it's one thing to make that a state or regional premiere and not make it a U.S. premiere. You know what I mean? So you can hold out for another one. So that you have to think about those sort of things.
Sure.
I was wondering. You said obviously that. Part of the reason you made Yeardley was because you needed something that was, cheaper than the other ideas that you had at the time. How much, though, whenever you were writing it, when you were coming with the story, how much were you thinking about the festivals down the line, just in terms of what kind of story plays good there and that kind of stuff? Or were you not even thinking about that when you were writing?
No, I was definitely thinking about it, unfortunately. I think that was probably a mistake. I'm not really. It was a story that I wanted to tell. It was something I was interested in at the time. Right now, I'm not interested in it in the least, But at the time, I loved the idea, and it was a story I wanted to tell at the time. But, you certainly think about those sort of things. And you certainly think about, well, how is this going to fare? Is this, you have to think about, is this going to hurt your chances in the future? Is it going to help it? What is it going to say about you as a filmmaker? So, yeah, certainly it was top of mind.
Well, I think that's something that a lot of even people like the Spielbergs of the world or whatever, the people that they thought I was going to be when I graduated film school. That's a huge part of the consideration of the jobs that they say yes to. It's like, do I want to spend a year doing this, and like being able to kind of predict your level of enthusiasm for something 6 months down the line, and that's not always easy. And so I think that's pretty interesting to hear, and I think it is something to definitely think about, especially in that world, because you are hoping to have the longest festival run possible. And then if that goes completely well, you get distribution, and that might be another 6 months before your movie's ever in the theater, and then you got to ramp up again and do all that press. So yeah, I think people maybe underestimate how long of a process that can be.
I think that another thing to keep in mind is you mentioned distribution, and that they will sell you everything. And they'll tell you, it's like, my distributor was one of those guys who was like, oh man, we really want this. I had a couple distributors that wanted to distribute Yeardley, and they all promised big things.
Right.
Con festival, we're going to four wall in New York and LA, we're going to do this and that, we're going to put it on. I remember one of them telling me, oh, we're going to put it on 35 millimeter because it's just that good and it's going to win an Oscar. And I was like, whoa, slow down. Slow the fuck down. It is
the first $15,000 movie to win an Oscar. Yeah.
But you get that kind of weird smoke blowing up your ass. And sure. I think one of the best pieces of advice I got was from David Green. He said, distributors are going to promise you everything. Just get it in writing. Anything that they want to do, get it in writing right away. And because they'll tell you anything on the phone to get you to sign a contract. And those contracts always are stacked in a way that's good for the distributor, not good for the filmmaker. And so, if they're promising you things, say, great, that sounds awesome, put it in writing. Enumerate it in some sort of, clause or something.
That's very interesting. I wonder if that world will change a little bit as these online places become more of a distribution option.
I hope so.
Hopefully finding more of a market for small films like that in the online space too.
Mm-hmm.
I know Joel Petrikis, who's the director of the movie Buzzard, which we've talked about previously, just released a film, and it's through Oscilloscope, which is they've done a fair amount of good big productions, but he's sort of releasing it as a pay what you want kind of model online, which that's an interesting strategy too. So I don't know. I think the future is definitely up in the air for what that's going to look like for smaller films, and hopefully weed out some of those scoundrels.
Yeah,
because
there's a lot of slimy people. Yeah.
So right now, you're planning to shoot a short. Are there more features after that? Like, what are your plans?
I always wanted to make films. I mean, that was something that, was in me. And I just knew early on what I wanted to do. I didn't know specifically why. It's just something I wanted to do. And I have very little desire to do anything else. I mean, this is what I want to do. I mean, I was a programmer for a while out here and, pretty successful at it. But, it just didn't complete me. It's not who I am. And it was more of like a paycheck type of deal. But so, I'll keep going after this short.
Craig, what do you think? Let's switch gears, talk about a movie?
I think this is a good time to start talking about Cavemen.
So today's movie is from 1981. It's called Quest for Fire, and I'm going to take the blame for being the one that's never heard of this movie. It seems pretty obvious now that it's something I should have heard of for a lot of different reasons. But correct me if I'm wrong, neither of you guys had seen it before?
I had never seen it.
I'd never seen it, no. I knew about it from the poster, and I just heard this interview with Ron Perlman talking about it, and all I could think was Ron Perlman was in that? The fact that Heath mentioned it was fortuitous.
Well, and then I think once you saw it, you probably realized, it's perfect for Ron Perlman, because Quest for Fire is the story which takes place in prehistoric time about 3 tribesmen who go search for a new source of fire. That's just the very brief synopsis from IMDb. And Ron Perlman does play one of these Neanderthals along with Everett McGill and Nicholas Cotty. And, of course, we have Radon Chong in here again. We just talked about in Fear City.
I believe he was a Homo sapien.
He was a Homo sapien. Well, we'll get into that a little bit because The science of this movie is a little flimsy here and there, and I think to the extent that the director, Jean-Jacques Ono, French director, I think in the commentary when the DVD came out, he was like, yeah, the book took place 80,000. The book was written in 1911 that this is based on, right? So a lot changed between when that author, J.H. Rosny Sr., set the book in 80,000 years ago, and what we know about that time period. Now, he said it certainly would have made sense to set it in a much more recent era, and probably certain things like the fact that I read there were no saber-toothed tigers of any sort outside of North America, certainly not in Europe, so things like that. Although I liked seeing them in this movie, probably got to check your anthropology PhD at the door if you're watching this.
I had to.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting movie. I mean, right off the bat, we should say there's really no dialogue to speak of. Now, there's a dialect and a whole lot of grunting, but no actual words that you're going to understand.
A lot of rape.
And a lot of rape.
A good bit of rape.
Why are you laughing at rape, Sean?
I'm not laughing at rape. Some of the way in which it was presented was humorous to me, and just
Stop laughing at rape, Sean.
It's very animalistic. These are descendants of apes and not very far removed in a lot of ways.
It's true.
There's some bug picking off the back of people's heads and eating them.
Blood licking.
Yeah, there's some penis biting that happens in this thing.
Yeah. Yes.
And
then, but also, Sean, penis healing.
Penis healing.
So I feel like, it was pretty balanced.
And a bond between tribes that can't be broken because two people fall in love, and there's a baby on the way by the end of this thing. So it was a pretty interesting ride, but. I don't know. Just let's hear just general thoughts. Heath, did you like Quest for Fire?
I did. I thought it was fun. I think it's one of those movies that you would probably like it a lot more if you saw it in '81. I think it's definitely dated.
Well, and let me say, I think that was one of the reasons I thought, this will be fun for us to watch, because you were the one that suggested The Emerald Forest, which we did a few episodes back, and I think they're of the same kin, probably, same family tree.
And that was a film that I watched in the cinema in my
theater?
hometown. Yeah, and that
Nice.
It was a double feature. It was that and Meatballs 2. I don't know who came up with that combination, but Emerald Forest was awesome. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but
it's good.
Yeah.
I liked it. We liked it.
I remember enjoying it a lot.
Craig, what about you? How did this movie work for you?
Man, I really loved Quest for Fire. I kind of knew of it. I was really intrigued by the poster, I think, as a kid. And so I've kind of always carried this poster around. I didn't understand exactly what it would be about. Of course, I never read up on it until
last night.
Too late and I had to watch it. But no, I mean, this movie is hilarious. And then I think it is certainly supposed to be hilarious to an extent. You're supposed to laugh at them, but I mean, honestly, by the end, like you do, or I do, love these characters. So even when they're in mortal danger of sinking into quicksand, and even though that's funny, I'm worried about them.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie really took me on a ride, I gotta say. What about you, Sean?
Well, just on that note, I pulled up the review that Roger Ebert wrote for this movie, and he sort of started off talking about how in the first couple minutes, he was laughing at these guys and wondering what he was getting into. And so he wrote, I'll just read some of this paragraph. He said, I suggested earlier that there's probably a temptation to laugh during Quest for Fire, especially during such touchy scenes as the one in which early woman teaches early man that it wasn't as good for her as it was for him. He says, but thinking over my response, I realized that I wasn't smiling at the movie, but at the behavior of the characters. Man is a comic beast. For all of our dignity, we are very simple in many of our wants and desires. And as we crawled out of the primeval sludge and started our long trek towards civilization, there must have been many more moments of comedy than of nobility. And I'm like you. Yeah, there was, specifically thinking of the scene where Radon Chong was a member of a different tribe than like the Ron Perlman and the Everett McGill characters. More advanced, less hairy, more covered in some sort of gray paint or ash or something, markings, if you will. Completely naked, of course. But she laughs when a rock falls off of something and hits Ron Perlman in the head. And these guys, I've never heard laughter before.
That was absolutely absurd. It was great.
It was. And she's got a very high-pitched, shrill, kind of interesting laugh. But then later on, they're sitting around, and Ron Perlman chucks a rock at one of the other guys, hits him in the head, and then they all crack up laughing. Even the guy whose head is bleeding profusely thinks it's funny, too. Great. And that is like, it's a weird step of evolution to depict in a movie like this that is at times very serious, but at times, absurd. But I think like it's such a better experience because of that. Like, and also, I mentioned the saber-toothed tigers. There's this moment where these three guys on their quest, and we should say, this movie is gorgeous. It was shot in Scotland, Africa, I think Kenya specifically, and Canada, and just some really gorgeous landscape photography. And they use real, I don't know if they're mountain lions or what, but they stuck tusk on them. These are real animals chasing after these dudes. There's no trees around except for one, and they all three climb up it, and the animals just park at the trunk of the tree. Yeah. So these vicious animals are sitting there over the course of a night, and then that scene ends, like the next day, I guess. I think it was Ron Perlman's character falls asleep, falls out of the tree, and immediately wakes up and is, frantically jumping back up the tree, but you realize that the lions have gone, and it's like, okay, yeah, these guys they're sort of dumb cavemen. I mean, their brains are not that developed. Also, just one other thing, and then we move on, but there was that one time where, and I think it was that cannibalistic tribe that had Radon Chong captured, held captive. They create a diversion, and then the Everett McGill character runs over and grabs a burning log from the fire and runs off, and then realizes, oh no, he actually picked up one that was not lit, and has to go back. And I was just like, you idiot! Like, I mean, I loved all that stuff. Like that to me, it made it such a richer experience. I think you're right. Like it sort of has a cumulative effect that you're caring for these guys and rooting for them.
Yeah, it's never played for, I guess, like Ebert was saying, it was never played for sort of comedy outside of the story. And I was thinking specifically about the first scene where I was really losing it was early on, where they've been attacked and they've run out in the middle of this bog. And then they're one sort of, I don't know if you could call him a village idiot caveman. I don't know.
Yeah. The bald guy?
Yeah, the bald guy.
Yeah.
Well, he's the keeper of the fire, right?
Right. And so he's walking out with this fire, and everyone's out on this little island going, oh, go, oh, go, go. And they're like gesturing for him to come to him. And every step he takes, he's almost like falling in the water. And that shit was killing me.
Yes.
And then
at the end. Killing me.
Yeah. And then what happened at the end with that guy?
I mean, that one was so absurd. Like he immediately just went down with it. Like he just fell right in the water.
Yeah.
He
like the whole movie is just about getting one tiny flame, and he just goes right into it.
They go on this adventure. They have the quest for fire. They return with it, and then they hand it to that guy again, and he immediately drops it in the water again.
That was great.
It's a great arc. Yeah.
You know what's funny about this story is like I even like how everybody was introduced. I really thought it was creepy when you first are introduced to Radon Chong's character.
She is kind of creepy.
And they're hanging from the tree by their limbs tied, and one of them has a missing arm, and that wasn't like a prosthetic. I mean, that person didn't have an arm. I mean, that was I don't know, it was just really creepy. It was very visceral.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that, it underlines this sort of barbaric nature of, that time period. It does sort of start off with this kind of calm early moments of 2001 Dawn of Man sequence, and then you realize, these people definitely have already discovered tools and weapons. They get attacked by this other tribe that is much more hairy and animal-like and closer to apes than even our lovable Neanderthal guys or
Homo sapiens.
I
don't know what they are. I just read on Wikipedia. I think the Neanderthals were the first ape-like group and then there was they were the Homo sapiens, and then
I see. Yes.
Radon Chong was the Cro-Magnon, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But there was no Piltdown Man.
There was no Piltdown.
Or Australopithecus, so that's all I'm saying.
That's all we remember from college class. Yeah. But no, I like that. I mean, you've got that moment where you're even just seeing them all sort of sleeping together and realizing, oh, there really is that sort of tribal pack kind of thing going on here. And then that gets threatened by, they use their nose to pick up on the fact that there's intruders coming into their area. But even seeing how that other tribe sort of staged their attack, like they drew them out of the cave, and then there were two on top of the cave that pushed the boulders down on top of them and that kind of thing. And then I think I kind of thought maybe you were going to talk about going into the bog as these, the survivors run away. One of them gets like straight up attacked by like 3 wolves. And again, these are real animals. This director, Jean-Jacques, he also directed the movie The Bear, and he's done Enemy at the Gates, 7 Years in Tibet, a couple of things like that. Just these big epics. But it seems as if, even with his most recent film, Wolf Totem, this guy's got a crazy experience working with animals and is really pretty damn good at it. It's as evident from this movie. Although I will say there was the one moment where Ron Perlman picked up a burning log and threw it at the wolves, and one of those wolves totally caught on fire.
Yeah.
And it ran away. It was a small amount of flame, but it clearly...
It was substantial enough.
Somebody got fined. Somebody got fined on that one.
That wolf felt that.
What?
Yeah.
How about that poor guy that he lost his twin brother, and then he falls down into that cave with the bear.
Yeah.
And he gets completely mauled. What was ridiculous, he comes out and he's just covered in blood, but he's not, his skin isn't flayed or anything like that. He just comes out and he's just covered in blood. And he's obviously would have died. He would have been completely mauled. This would be a death. But he makes it out, and you see him at the very end, and some chick is like licking his arm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of interesting.
And he had
tongue bath, baby.
And he had this goofy, like, sort of sideways grin on his face. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, there's a bit of that animal cleaning. Let's talk about the mammoth scene, the mastodon scene. 'Cause I know that bothered you.
That was probably my least favorite scene. Well, I mean, it's just the idea that we're being surrounded, and they need to. It's very convenient to have the mammoths show up or the mastodons, and they go over and offer it hay, and that's going to be enough to make that the little brains inside these mastodons are going to go, oh, you're offering me food, you must be something that I can protect, and so I will protect you now from these threats because I'm smart enough to understand what is your threat and what you're doing. No, it's ridiculous. It was the idea. Well, Kubrick. I mentioned this to Sean while we were watching it. I was like, Kubrick used to talk about a lot of, sort of 1970s filmmakers that would always put the noble savage into their movies. And I guess the greatest example of that would be like 1980s. You got Dances with Wolves, that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And it's where, if it's untouched nature. It hasn't been tainted by Western democracy or anything like that. And so they're naturally good, and that's the same thing for animals. It's society in Western democracy that has tainted them, and that has always been something that he kind of rolled his eyes at. And you see it throughout, and especially in movies back in like the 70s and 80s. And that was a perfect example of it with the mastodons.
I didn't have the same read on that, and this was another scene that I thought was hilarious. And it's interesting that was your take on it, because that I can see what you're saying. But my take on it was that those mammoth mastodons were basically not going to do shit. They were just big and scary, and everyone's like, I don't know. I don't know what to do now. They're big and scary. And so that motherfucker just gives the guy some hay. Like, they're not going to protect him and shit. Like, it's just... But who has... And then they just... I guess they do roar again.
Yeah.
And that kind of does signify that they're sort of on their side.
Well, my thought was, these mammoths have no problem getting this exact same hay themselves. Like, it's not much of a gift.
That's a good point. He just picked it up off the fucking ground and like, here you go. Yeah, it was that whole scene.
Stoop over.
It was so ludicrous and absurd. And
I thought it was cool to see those animals there. Mm-hmm. they used elephants and then dressed them up, and it looked a little fake. There were some times where the shot selection was just, I think, maybe didn't sell the effect of it a little bit in that moment. But it still was kind of cool. It's like, oh yeah, there's like a woolly mammoth there.
The problem I had, I was fine with it when he had the elephants dressed up like the mammoths or the mastodons or whatever, and because I bought it. I think what felt fakey was every time he would go in for a close up, and I noticed the director did this often, where he'd go in for a closer shot, and he'd go low angle, and that was some form of animatronics. Like it looked like with the nose going up and all that. Like that was sort of puppetry. And the same thing with the bear fight. There was shots of real bears, and he would do quick cuts, but he would cut between a fake bear and a real bear, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it felt like puppetry, and so
yeah.
Still, I think on the whole, pretty solid in that regard.
No, especially for '82,
stuff.
or '81.
Yeah,
I mean,
like the fact that none of it was stop motion or anything. At least that
and blue screen
completely take you out of it. Yeah.
Here's a question for you guys that I want to ask, and if I have one sort of overriding critique of this, and it's not even really a critique, but I'm just curious what you think about it. The question I asked myself was, by the end of it, is it clear why the Radon Chong character is into this caveman, the Everett McGill character, or to the extent that she develops? I mean, I think by the end of that movie, we're supposed to take away that this is a loving relationship between these two.
Saved her life.
But did he? Because I thought that's what it is. But then she got down on her own, right?
Did she?
I think she did. Because she was kind of pulling away at the ropes, and she could have just ran away. She sort of followed them.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. And so, I mean, there were times where they were like trying to leave her, and then there were times where she left. And I mean, I get it works in the sense of this movie. Yeah. I think it's not a problem. I think stopping and think about it, because I was like, oh, well, yeah, he saved her. But I was like, oh, wait, did he save her? I don't know that he did.
So all the things that you had to suspend your disbelief.
That was not the biggest one, no.
This is the one that you're going to harp on.
No, I think it's the biggest story question I have.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of shoehorning a romance into a movie, like, I wouldn't have expected this to be one of those movies where we needed to have a romance thread. I can see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, yes, they did create sort of a diversion that helped her get away, but then like the next thing their next interaction is him raping her, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's hard to recover from.
That usually is like that's the end of the relationship.
But you have to remember, I think, but that feels a little bit more true to maybe the way primitive man was,
absolutely.
Like rape wasn't seen as immoral back then, neither was murder and eating people. Right. I think it was just, the morality is obviously different back then than it is today. So
yeah, and I think maybe you're right. It's like if you're looking at it as I have to choose a mate to continue our society, the toughest, strongest guy is most likely to keep me alive.
Yeah.
So there's probably some of that. But this is a good segue to a scene that I almost forgot about. The scene where Everett McGill's character is brought back to, or when he gets in the quicksand and then is kind of captured, so to speak, by Radon Chong's tribe. He is brought into the hut, given an elaborate feast, and then a line of large women are brought in for him to basically have his way with.
What was the point of them being large?
I think one thing I read was that they were sort of like in that culture, I guess, or in that tribe that, it means that they've had the most food or that these are the prized possessions. They're the sort of elite class of women in that.
Why would they give it? Why would they give it to a complete stranger?
That I don't know. Yeah,
and not even of the same species. It's sort of subspecies.
You can go on Wikipedia, and their plot synopsis is quite lengthy, and like they've got all the tribe names and everything kind of broken down. Which maybe they're pulling from the book some a little bit, but they talk about that scene, and you can read a little bit more about that if you're interested. But yeah, I don't know. It still was a bit.
It was bizarre.
It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, not that it would answer the question as to why they would do it, but when I was watching it, for some reason, I was thinking that This is maybe showing how stupid I am. I was thinking that they were wanting him to like impregnate some of their ladies.
That's interesting too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but and then they prevented Radon Chong from sleeping with him.
From laying down with him.
Right. Yeah, so that was kind of interesting too. It's like obviously there's some sort of class system going on there.
Right.
And status. But yeah, all that stuff was really interesting, and especially, removing the sort of burden of dialogue and conversation, I guess, from that. Mm-hmm. Like it really does allow you to do scenes like that and make them visual, and then it's kind of just up to the audience to figure out what you're supposed to take away from it. And that, man, can you imagine this movie getting made in any capacity right now?
No,
it's really tough.
Well, what do you think they would have to change? Yeah, I think honestly, I think that the love affair was probably something that they had to put in there for the time.
I'd be surprised if that's in the book in the same way.
Right.
I think you're right.
I bet you that was something in order for it to be in theaters, they had to put in the love interest. I wonder if they remade the film today, what things would change. That would probably be one thing that I think a good filmmaker would probably say, well, we can do without.
Yeah. I mean, even to the extent that, like what you're saying, Craig, like just don't have them end up together. Like, it's not. Yeah, even it's not. I don't think it would have felt like a romance being shoehorned in there without that last scene. In a lot of ways, like, or if she had gone her separate ways at some point, like you would get it. I think.
I bet you they would make things much more morally ambiguous today. But I guarantee you the scenes where there is just blatant rape that's happening, and that happens a lot.
Yes,
that
does.
You're introduced to it early,
and like it's almost throwaway. Like early on, it's just like meh.
That would be handled in a much more different way today, I think, than it was back then. It would be handled in either a very look how awful this is sort of way, or it would be sort of left to the imagination. But it wouldn't be painted as this is just what happens.
Well, yeah, it's hard to look at it, too, because, I thought, you're watching this, and I'm sure the inspiration is to go watch a nature documentary where that happens, and, you see the animals, they just mount, and then they just dismount, and they go, it's like it never happened.
Right.
And that's how this is, with the exception of the evolution of that relationship between those two. It does become something else, in kind of an interesting way. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. The only sort of modern movie I could think of as a comparison was Apocalypto, which I like a lot, and that has sort of it's got the relationship stuff in it too, but it removes the language in some ways.
Well, and speaking of language, that's a good question. How much did Anthony Burgess's language help you in this movie? There's a credit at the beginning that says Anthony Burgess came up with the language.
Yes.
The languages in the film. To be honest, I was never able to discern anything, even so much as someone's name.
I did read today that apparently there's a South Park episode where they say ata, which I guess was the word for fire, which I didn't even pick up until I read that. I'm kind of with you. I mean, I could tell that there was something there, it wasn't just them just making noises. Right. I think that was maybe the benefit of having somebody the author of Clockwork Orange come and do that. But as far as me picking up on what any of it meant, no. I did read that, I think maybe on the DVD, you can turn on subtitles, and maybe they sort of, at least phonetically, attempted to put something down there. So I think people who have hearing loss could at least pick up on some of that. That would be really interesting.
Just as confused as the rest of us.
Yeah, that would be crazy to check out.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's I didn't take much more from it other than it was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was just a novelty for me too.
One other thing looking at the IMDb trivia. A majority of the scenes were shot in a single take. I don't buy that. There's no way.
I bet you it's...
How do you work with animals and do a single take?
You rehearse. That's probably...
I don't know.
I don't buy it either.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know. It could just be PR, but I don't know. That director was pretty spectacular. He's definitely... That was a hell of a film to attempt to make.
Yeah.
And he pulled it off, I think, pretty successfully.
One other awesome thing from the IMDb trivia is the very first thing is that the set designer caught anthrax when he handled untreated animal skins while working on set. No clue if he survived. I don't know. They don't put that here. But and then one other kind of crew person I wanted to mention that
Nobody cared about him anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
He ain't above the line.
There's this guy, Michael D. Moore, who was credited in this movie, and let me find it here if I can get the exact
Yeah, we'll wait.
credit.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Edit this out.
No. We'll leave it in. It's good.
He's a second unit director. Man, listen to this. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Patton, The Electric Horseman, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Six Pack, Temple of Doom, Ishtar, Willow, Last Crusade, Ghostbusters 2, The Mighty Ducks, Ninja Turtles 3, Cool Runnings, The Three Musketeers, etc. That's a pretty awesome
second unit.
second unit on all those.
You know, I feel like people who do second unit just kind of carve out a niche.
Yeah.
And just like assistant editors, and like you can have a great career and be really good, and that's what you do.
Well, obviously Spielberg liked him for Indiana Jones because he did all three of those. So that's pretty awesome. Good
That
for
is
that
pretty
guy.
awesome.
That is awesome.
Any other things? Any favorite scenes? I loved the seeing those people make the fire with the sticks in the stone.
Yeah.
And seeing those reactions to that, and then being properly amazed and kind of overwhelmed by it. Love that scene. Any other favorite scenes, Heath?
I was trying to think.
Penis biting?
No. No, actually, the penis biting one kind of bugged me because it healed so fast.
Well, I mean,
you think about this primitive man going in for the bite.
Cannibal, no less.
Cannibal. Like, he knows how to tear through some fucking flesh. And it's not like there's a lot of protection down there. And, it's pretty tender meat. So I feel like he could do some fucking damage. But no, Ray Dawn Chong comes in with some fucking wet spinach and just slathers it on his penis. And the next scene, he's ready to hump her. It's like ridiculous.
Well, you know what I just thought of, actually, bringing that up, is the scene from Shawshank when they corner Tim Robbins, like, you're going to put what I give you in your mouth, and he's like, I'll hit you with this. Your brain's going to lock, your jaw will lock, or my jaw, whatever the scene was.
It was his jaw, yeah.
Yes. And I'll bite your penis off. And that scene actually ends that way with him hitting the penis biter over the head with a rock. So I don't know, maybe Tim Robbins' whole speech was just pure bullshit. Because that guy's, it seemed he did not have a cannibal like locked onto his penis after he got knocked out.
I'm pretty sure that Shawshank Redemption is probably not the place that I go for medical accuracy, but sure, you do you.
Well, hey, when I'm thinking of scenes that involve penis biting, those are really the only two that come to mind.
Well, no, there's one in Startup, isn't there?
Was there?
What, there's a guard named Johnson who gets his penis bitten.
That's right. Startup, episode number 2 of our podcast. We'll all go back and listen to that.
I'll do a super cut of penis biting, and then we'll have something we can talk about.
Well, Craig, any other favorite scene from you? From Quest for Fire?
Yeah. Again, I'll point out the quicksand scene was also very hilarious to me. Even though I was worried about the character, because for a second I kind of thought, wow, and I thought the same thing when the bear attack happened, and now I kind of wish that they would have let the characters die, just because I felt like the whole time I felt like, man, it's so easy to die back then.
Yeah,
it's just so like you just get a small infection, you're just toast. So I kind of wanted him to just die, and then everyone's just like, where is he? Like, I have no idea where he went.
Did you notice the skull in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody had died there for sure.
Yes.
I don't think those skulls...
that was the thing. And like his buddies are just up on a rock, just completely oblivious, and he's down there screaming. He has no idea what's happening to him. And then a bunch of assholes come out and just start laughing at him.
Yeah, that was
He's great. Like, this is the worst way to die.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was weird, too, when that happened to those two guys that fell in the quicksand. It wasn't even quicksand. It didn't even look like quicksand.
Yeah.
It was like just water.
It was underwater, yeah.
But when those guys crowd around and they start laughing at them, then you cut to the next scene and they're just kind of walking around camp, and I'm like, okay, what happened between here?
They were released in a pretty conveniently easy way.
Yeah.
We missed out part of that. Maybe there's a longer cut that kind of has a bit of that. It does seem like people just went to sleep and then they woke up a little bit earlier than everybody else. So
and these guys are stealing shit and leaving, and I'm like, what an irresponsible tribe.
And not very quiet about it either. Like, yeah. Well, I think to wrap this up, we should probably mention that Iron Maiden has a song called Quest for Fire from Peace of Mind. And it literally is about the movie. It's the exact same plot. It's great. And also, it turns out 1981 was a pretty big year for Cavemen. You had History of the World Part 1, the Mel Brooks movie. There's a Caveman segment in that. And then there was the movie Caveman, starring Ringo Starr and Dennis Quaid, which I watched a bit of this afternoon, and boy, is that a whole different can of worms. Does not look good at all. So I think this had to be the highlight of the Caveman trilogy for 1981, and it did win an Oscar for Best Makeup, and I think well-deserved. Well-deserved.
Yeah. I feel like this is a movie I could really recommend to a lot of people.
I think so, and
I think they wouldn't trust me at first, but I was like, you just have to sit down and watch it.
Yeah, and
And that'll be all right.
it's never dull, it's never boring, and it's on Netflix right now, so go check it out. There is a behind the scenes on YouTube, like a 3-part thing. Unfortunately, the only version I could find was in French with Japanese subtitles, it looked like. So even when they're interviewing Ron Perlman and he's speaking English, there's a French translator. But there's still a lot of cool stuff. You can watch them put on the makeup. You can see that, yes, Rae Dawn Chong was just naked around set, even when she was not being filmed. So I think they said that was one of the reasons she got the role, because she was very willing.
Make sure you put in a da-da at that point.
Will do. Yeah. Well, I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody about Rae Dawn Chong. Like that's half of her career is naked. But man, I would love to find an English translated version of that because it looked really, really cool.
Yeah.
So that's Quest for Fire.
Quest for Fire.
Heath, thanks for joining us.
Man, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Craig, thanks for being you.
Hey, thanks, man.
And if you want to check us out online, go to neverheardpodcast.com. All the links you need. Look us up on Facebook, and we'll post a trailer or maybe a fun clip of some Quicksand or something.
Pinterest.
We don't have a Pinterest site. Yeah, no Pinterest. All right, y'all.
Peace.
Fire.
Good night.